Hello and welcome to another Play Than Say. Going to try and tackle a tricky subject today. Just a disclaimer before I start, this is pure opinion and not fact. It's just what I reckon. So the subject we're going to be trying to cover is female gamers, competitive gamers, and why there is still an uneven mix between the two. The first thing that most people want to look at is physical reasons, and they draw a lot of parity from sports from this, and hormonally, men, women, we grow muscle differently in different places for different reasons because of the survival of our species, which, let's face it, is more important than kicking a ball into the net. Well, was more important. And it's hard to translate this into games. I mean, if we look at the first-person shooters or even arena fighting or the Street Fighter style games, muscle isn't really still used, but there is a lot of studies out there, and if you do look at the studies about how tendons are very different between males and females, which could imply a natural advantage of reaction time when it comes between one or the other. But there are games out there, of course, where you've got your strategy games, but I can't really say StarCraft 2 isn't down to how quickly you can press the buttons and how quickly you can get things done, because the main point of that game generally is there's a bit of rock, paper, scissors between each people, of tactics and things like that. But even if you look at a game like Hearthstone, which is really just down to pure thoughts, it's still a very male-dominated arena, which implies that this can't be the reason that this is happening. The second major impact that a lot of people seem to focus on is social or cultural reasons. And there is a lot of pressure in a lot of different countries that women should have traditional roles. I don't agree with that, just saying that, but it does happen. We can't deny that. And there's even a lot of social pressures that we should more confine to our roles, and that would be better for everyone. But even in the main world of sport, the females have been pushing through and ignoring against this. So it's hard to see why that hasn't translated over to gaming. There's a lot of studies about the different types of games that females and males play together, and it does tend to show that there tends to be a lot more female gamers in the more casual gaming market, but there still should be at least one famous female gamer who's made it and still making it today. Under social reasons as well, I guess we could group hostility. So unfortunately, the vocal minority will outweigh the silent majority in this, and there's a lot of hatred that can go their way. And a lot of the game time, it isn't centred around the game they're playing, it's about them as a person. They seem to almost not be happy unless it's Angelina Jolie who's going to be their gamer. And even then, they'll probably still find some way to try and push her buttons. And this should stop. This really should just stop, but that's not the point of this video. So for social reasons, I don't see a reason there that can equate. I mean, I've talked about personal experience. When I was a CS 1.Go player, the last tournament I played in where my clan didn't turn up, I went with a bunch of random people there, and one was a CS 1.6 UK player called Jaffa. Pretty sure it's Jaffa or Jaffe. We are talking about like 12 years ago, so memory is a little bit vague on that one. But we got through to the semi-finals, actually ended up coming third, which was pretty good. But every time we won a game, the hostility was instantly thrown towards her. She wasn't the captain, I was the captain. It wasn't thrown towards me at all. And there was even one case of a gamer who physically confronted Jaffe. And when at the time I got there, most of it had been broken up because we were on different floors, because we hadn't actually booked to come and play together at this LAN. And for me, that was just unacceptable, and the damage that has done could have influenced any of the other female gamers that may have been around it, that play in the World of Warcraft players, the Guild War players, from wanting to push onto that level. They may not have wanted to be part of that world, and I, as a male, don't want to be part of that world. I don't want to go in with physical violence being threatened towards me. And even as I am 6'3" bloke, I don't want that. It's not a world I want to be part of. It's very off-putting. And that hostility and that male-driven society could be a problem with that. Another thing that people point out as the problem in games is female representation in games. A lot stating that females are poorly represented in games and this puts females off from gaming, but that doesn't stack up in the same way that when feminists always complained about movies didn't. And I'm going to get the hate mail for saying this now. Men aren't represented well in games. Do you think I really look like any of the male characters? I mean, I grew up watching action films. Did I look like Arnold Schwarzenegger or Jean-Claude Van Damme? Am I ever going to look that way without a million steroids and destroying my livers? Well, maybe like John, because he's a bit more of a realistic looker than him, but I'm never going to achieve that. And the unrealistic argument of putting people off is just a little bit silly. I mean, you could argue that women live in a more centric world where they are told to care more about their looks than what men are. But then again, that wouldn't explain why there is a breakthrough in sport and not a breakthrough in competitive gaming. Not saying that the two are similar. In fact, the two are worlds apart, and they should be worlds apart. We shouldn't be the competitive gaming shouldn't be afraid to take leafs out of the sporting world's books and see what they've done well and try and copy and emulate that. But you do have to remember these are two completely different identities. And even with some female gaming, the big issue has popped up of how you define a female. In sports, there's very traditional. You basically look at XX versus XY. But for someone growing up who is transgender, I hope I've got that one right. If not, then please feel free to post. Don't post angrily. I'll re-edit this bit if I have got that wording wrong. Who all their lives are going to be told by their friends that they... And if society, if it should be the way it should be, that they are a male or a female, despite being what they're born. But if you're going to start differentiating female and male tournaments in them, you've got to define what you're classing as male and female. If you're doing it purely because you think social reasons are the reasons they're not doing it, then transgenders might be fine. I mean, if you think it's more physical, then you may have to go down the more DNA route. And there's even a South African runner who I've forgotten the name of now, who's been having a terrible time in her sport because no one will believe, well, not saying no one, a lot of people don't believe that she is a woman. And this causes her great distress, I must imagine. She spent her whole life training to try and be this good, and people are putting her down because she doesn't seem to have the tits that Serena Williams and Venus Williams have, who are, by the way, another great female sports couple who have come through, and there's been great idols in the world of female sport, which does bring me on to my next subject. Role models. Again, this is going to be very controversial, and I do apologise to people who I offend there, but there have been female gamers who have broken through to the mainstream. I'm not going to name names, who have then retired, citing that they can't take the amount of hate that's coming their way. Every movement has to start with an individual, and an individual has to stand up, and an individual has to make it and say, I don't care what you say, I'm here. I'm going to represent what I want to represent, and people who want to role model that, it's going to make it a lot more easier for them to justify it coming into the sport. I mean, imagine being at school and there being no such thing as female football, and being a female and wanting to play football, you would be ostracised for that. But if you could say, well, look, there's Kelly Smith. I mean, look at what she's made of her life and her career. She's been able to make a life and living out of football, and she's damn good at it. She might play for England, and we might not have never done anything good in football, but she is a good footballer. And the same has to come through in football. There has to be a role model. There has to be someone who's going to stand up and say, I am a female gamer. The vocal minority of idiots who want to bash me and put me down, That's fine, but I'm here, I'm representing, and almost be that burden and take all of that for the next generation. The great movement of racial equality in America, I believe there is a great role model of a woman who wouldn't give up her seat on the bus. I mean, it'd been very easy for her to have given up and just to complain about it and to vocalise about it, but she stood up for what she believed in and she stuck with it. And there needs to be a female like that in the gaming world. It's unfortunately not going to happen very easily, because you could spend 10 hours of your life learning to play a game like StarCraft every day, or you could, if you're female, unfortunately I'm going to have to say this, you could just set up a Twitch channel and watch the donations generally roll in. But there has to be someone who has that passion to stand up, to go forward, and to say, I am who I am, and fuck the rest of you. And lastly, I do want to do a sport comparison. I know I said we should keep them the same, but as I said, we should learn lessons from things that have succeeded. And the old saying is that you don't cure the illness, you prevent the illness, which brings to grassroots. The problem with competitive gaming is there's not a lot of grassroots tournaments out there. There's not a lot to get people interested in playing it with lower sort of difficulty levels that are taken the same way. And I think that female and male gaming doesn't need to be separated, because I don't think the physical differences are that major to warrant that. What I think needs to be addressed is the entry level of gaming. Under 16s, under 18 tournaments, under 21 tournaments could all give people an entry level into to gaming, rather than just showing the top 32 players playing in every tournament. The multiple levels of tournaments and the multiple leagues and things like that would encourage a lot more people, and it's weird that we used to have that sort of thing. When it used to be self-modulated back in the days of clan base and enemy down, you would start at the bottom and you would work your way up. So there was, and you stayed in the level to where you were by your rank, and you would play other people of the same level as you. You would improve and you would try and go through it that way. There seems to be a big separation away from that now, that unless you are going to be properly a competitive gamer, you shouldn't even bother entering into any level of anything. So I do feel that there needs to be a new grassroots organisation that's going to take this under their wing, and aren't going to bother with the big tournaments, the flashy lights, but are going to run some sort of league which allows people at any level to be able to play up competitively and to get that enjoyment and get that feel and see how it's going to affect them going forward. I think the games that have already exist, it's too late for them. If you want to try and get into StarCraft, then you are going to have an awful lot of catching up to do, and you're going to have to give a couple of years of your life all the time to this game just to even start making to the point where you could make even a bit of a living out of this. Which brings me into my conclusion. I believe that the problem is grassroots, and I believe that gaming now is at a level of snobbishness almost, and we need to reintroduce some organisation that is going to look after all the lower levels of tiering of gaming and give people that early experience, give people that early feeling of what it feels like to be competitive. If at more of a base level, if females could see that they can be competitive, that they can compete in these games, then I do believe that going from step to step to step up to when they can be professional gamers would be a lot easier than just throwing in the faith of a couple of years of your life of practice of a game that you might not even be any good of, that also ultimately might be replaced. Would be a lot more beneficial towards the equality and getting more people involved in competitive gaming than any of this harsh ripping the band-aid off tactics that we're doing now, where we're doing female-only game tournaments, which of course no one knows how to host because most of the higher-ups in gamings and people probably throwing these tournaments are probably male-orientated. And there was a Hearthstone tournament recently, which if you look at, it's just not the way to do it. I apologise for the video in the background of this, but I really had nothing else to put on. But anyway, enjoy the wild.